So when Ashley and I were putting this together, we realized we were going to be at the end of the day, and everyone's really tired of having slides put into all day. So we thought a fireside chat on the 4 T's of FinOps was going to be like the right topic. So we do have a little bit of content, but the more we can make this conversational and have some questions and some dialogue, it's more fun for us, it's more fun for you, and everyone wins. So on that note, my name is McLaughlin. I'm the Director of Strategic Services at the FinOps Foundation. Previously, I worked for Capital One as a product manager and led our global professional services for one FinOps vendor and was the head of product for another FinOps vendor before eventually joining the FinOps Foundation.
And my name is Hromatko. I'm the VP of Operations at the FinOps Foundation. Prior to that, I worked for Pearson. It's a big education company, and I ran their global FinOps team. I like to tell people that our Black Friday is when all of New York 6th graders would start testing at the same time at 8 a.m. That was our Black Friday in education. So a little bit about the FinOps Foundation. So we are a nonprofit organization. We're part of the Linux Foundation. So if you're familiar with FINOS, we are like a brother-sister organization to that. We focus on 3 core areas, which is around connections. So we do a series of virtual events, in-person events, mentoring opportunities, and then we want to be able to educate everybody no matter where they're at. So if you're just kind of getting into this FinOps field, maybe you're in college or you're in your first entry-level job, we want to make sure there's training available, all the way up to if you've been a professional doing FinOps for the last 4 or 5 years and you're really looking to accelerate yourself, we offer a professional course as well. And then the last area that we focus on is best practices and specifications. And so what that means is there's inherently ways that you should do cloud forecasting, good, bad ways, and then there's also, it depends on your organization. And so we try to put out white papers, playbooks. We're starting this next year to move into more technical type content. So we're just putting all that out into the open source for anybody to consume. And then just to kind of continue on, we're about a community of about 12,000 members. We do have 48 of the Fortune 500 that are contributing to the foundation. We're pretty global. We're in the US, EMEA, and APAC region. And just a big milestone, we'll actually hit about 10,000 certified practitioners by the end of this month.
So we are the 7th time that this slide has probably been presented today, so I won't reread it to you. Only thing I would say differently is it's not financial operations. It is the idea of finance being DevOps is where the word FinOps comes from. And it's not just about cost optimization or cost savings. To me, FinOps at its core is really a data and a culture problem. And some of the things we're going to talk to today is how we are helping the community solve this data and culture problem.
Yeah, and I want to give an example. So when I was at Pearson, we ran FinOps in 2 ways, a good way and a bad way. One thing we did is we created a program to start, and we hired some contract employees, and we just basically played whack-a-mole, and we just started shutting things off left and right, and it was really successful. We saved a lot of money, but it wasn't something that was going to stay long-term. Once those contractors end, all of the infrastructure starts spinning up again, the cobwebs get created again, right? And so we decided to take the methodology that it's not something that, it's a headache and you can give it a pill and a prescription, but it has to be a practice. It has to be something that you're training yourself consistently and constantly to do. And so that's the big shift I want you guys to take away, is it's not something that I just go in and I do and then I'm done. It's something your whole entire organization needs to adapt. The other thing we'll kind of say, if you're kind of familiar with security, you usually have a CISO organization, right? That's got a certain head count, but it's everybody's responsibility in the organization to care about security, from your personal laptop, from the day that you walk in your badge, and that's the same way it is with FinOps. Is yes, you may have a central team or you may have a hub and spoke team those are the people that are constantly trying to put out new capabilities, new features, new tooling around FinOps, but it really is every single engineer that has access to any cloud provider is their responsibility to care about the efficiency of what is built.
And everything ultimately drives back to the FinOps framework. So the framework essentially gets owned and maintained by the community, but it's our responsibility as the FinOps Foundation to make sure this is always relevant to the practitioners. So we'll just make sure we walk through this briefly. So as we're talking, any language that we're using, it's common for everyone in the room. So some really, really key concepts in terms of FinOps is we have our core principles. There's nothing crazy here. We talk about it being a multi-discipline practice. So there's all these different personas that are really involved in your FinOps practice. So while you might have a centralized FinOps team, it's important to work with procurement. So they're helping you with those best practices of actually procuring the cloud for your organization. They're really the best in the organization to help you understand what are best practices, what are the policies and procedures for your organizations. And same with engineering and product folks. At the end of the day, whatever the data you have is telling you that there's a right sizing recommendation, going to the application owners or the people who are closest essentially to the customer is where you're going to get the most useful information. There's a couple other really key concepts that we talk about within FinOps. This whole idea of crawl, walk, run. Can't tell you how many times I've seen organizations where they go take the FinOps training, they get really excited about doing all these things, and they try to go fly right into it and usually crash and burn. It's really important to start, like, what's your priorities for your organization? Start in that pre-crawl, crawl, walk, run stage, and slowly work through maturity. And then there's more information on our website, but everything ties back then to these domains and capabilities. So as we think about it, the domains are the what that you're trying to do, and the capabilities that sit underneath them are how you go about doing that. So, what you're trying to accomplish is understanding your cloud usage and costs. There are a number of capabilities that sit underneath that, which is how you'd actually go about doing the thing.
Perfect. And another part of being about the foundation is creating open source utilities as well. So here's just a kind of a couple that we have. So Kyle just talked about the framework. Udam did a presentation this morning on focus, so that's going to be a specification. This year we'll be launching our State of FinOps for the 4th year in a row. This is really great for us to kind of see future trends of FinOps and then also collect a lot of benchmark data. We have working groups over the last about 3-4 years. We've put out 50 different type of workbooks and playbooks. And then if you FinOps, usually there's service organizations or vendors that are in this space, and so we help folks guide on making those decisions of purchases. And then recently, this last year, we also put out an assessment. So this is kind of benchmarking yourself. So there's outputs, and there's a lot of these utilities that come from the open source community. So let's get into the 4 T's of FinOps. So a lot of times when people are asking us, like, how do I get started with FinOps? Or like, what is FinOps? What am I doing? I like to say, well, you need talent to begin with. You need talent that is operating in the cloud and developing in the cloud. And you need talent that are actual FinOps people that are focused on this. Now, that might be one person at your organization that's part-time doing this. But typically what we're seeing in larger organizations, it does become a full-fledged team. And then even when you have a team, you may even have champions within the business units that are spending some significant time working with the core team to deploy that out to the edge. So you need people. You also need training, right? From day one, you probably have had your engineers learning to take like AWS or GCP training. And you also need them to be familiar with making optimization recommendations. I can't tell you the number of times when a new service was put out by a cloud provider and an engineer was so eager to test it, but had no idea of what the output was going to be. And then we figured it out very quickly when the bill came in. So training is critical. Typically, there's a tooling. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but it can be a homegrown built tool, or it can be a tool that's out in a SaaS marketplace as well. Especially if you're a large organization and you need to aggregate from multiple clouds, you're going to need something to put all that data together. And then technology is important as well. You need to be up to date on the latest trends in technology from your FinOps person all the way to your engineering teams. A couple trends that we're watching right now is AI. Like everyone's hyped up about AI. I have a really good story of a company that their senior executive said, this is AI week, everybody go play in AI, go ask for an account and go play in it and see what happens. And they end up spending in 1 week $200,000 from an innovation week, and they just didn't anticipate that was going to happen with so many people going to test around in it. And so it's important to stay up to date on the latest trends, but also know what the value effect of those technologies are going to be.
All right, we're getting into the fun fireside chat part of this. Full confession, we do not have enough content, so start thinking of your questions now. And anyone who asks me a question will get a free drink ticket. Just don't tell Gab or the rest of the FINOS staff, because I'm pretty sure it's fine. So Ashley, you ran a FinOps organization before. Like, where should someone even get started if they're embracing on a FinOps journey?
Yeah, so a lot of times, even walking around today, or people come into the booth, they're like, do I have a FinOps team? And I'm like, figure out who's doing your bill. Somebody is inherently getting your invoice and doing something with it. That person probably is wearing a FinOps hat and maybe 3 other hats too. So figure out who's doing your invoicing, who's caring about allocating that. And then I think find an executive sponsor. Find someone that is also just as passionate about the cloud costs that you are as well. Start small, and I'd also say, like, if you're interested in the topic, like, figure out how you can plug into a project around this too. Once you find your executive sponsor, you really need to start building out a project plan. And that's going to be different from everybody. Some people can be like, I really cannot get to like a full-fledged chargeback, but I just need to do the training stuff right now. Or I just need to have some guardrails and some anomaly detection set up. And so you're going to figure out where to start based on where your business needs are right now. One thing that excites me about getting started with FinOps is 4 years ago, we were all getting started when we hit a tipping point where everybody's panicking about the cloud bill. And now for the first time, we're starting to see people start to like build a FinOps practice as soon as they're signing like an RFP with a cloud provider. So start early, find a sponsor, and align with wherever you think the gap is that you can solve quickly. Oh yeah, click play. The other thing I'll mention is where does the FinOps team sit? People ask this question a lot. Again, it depends. And so in my example, I sat under a CIO, but that's because we had 5 CTOs. There's some organizations that have 1 CTO, and so you're going to need to sit wherever you can have executive influence, but also be connected heavily into the engineering team. Another good example is Apple. Their FinOps team sits within finance. That makes sense for the organization because they're all very tech-heavy organization that has engineers sitting underneath finance. And so I would say if you're buried and you can't get to the C-suite and have conversations, you're probably not sitting in the right place. And also just understand that like not one of these people are going to be your boss, they're all going to be your boss. So there's constantly dotted lines where, yes, I report to the CIO, but I very much felt accountable to the CFO in the organization too.
And we asked the community, so part of our State of FinOps survey data that we had, I think, over 1,000 people respond last year in 2023. And this is what the community was telling us of what the different reporting structures are. I think the truth here is it really doesn't matter. It's what's going to be effective for your organization. So depending on how your organization structure, the sector you're in, like being underneath the chief financial officer may make the most sense. In another situation, it might be the CTO. We've seen this evolving over a number of years. And quick plug, 2024 survey is out there. Go to data.finops.org, take the survey.
Correct. And then the other question we get is like, when do you start? If you're spending less than $1 million, you're going to probably need some guardrails around it. When we see people spending like $1 million a month, that's when they're starting to put together full-fledged teams. Early days, when you're starting off, you can kind of beg, borrow, and steal resources to maybe help with some things. But by the time you're up in the $500 million a year, you probably have a dedicated team. We've seen most large dedicated teams actually run more as a platform team, and so they're actually building their own tooling. It also depends on the complexity where maybe you are only spending $100 million in it, but you're servicing all the business units. So you've got each business unit that has a specific need. I did that where each business unit person had a FinOps analyst that knew the applications kind of like the back of their hand. So this will grow with your complexity and whatever your decision is on how you decide to operate your team too.
So actually, we talked about how to get started. We talked about if you're under $1 million, you probably barely need a FinOps team, or one person can do it side of desk. You probably don't even need a tool. Excel might work just fine. Once you get into the journey, like what are some challenges that you faced at Pearson and challenges that other practitioners are seeing?
Yeah, perfect. So I'll show some more State of FinOps data. Don't love this top line because it says get engineers to take action, and that feels very like passive aggressive, right? So it's not necessarily about getting engineers to take action. It's how do you talk to an engineer, first of all, solve that? How do you look at their backlog? How do you get things prioritized with them? How do you make sure it's a conversation where you're solutioning together versus like throwing over right-sizing recommendations to them? So this continues to be our number one. The down arrow is like optimistic for us because it's gone down a little bit in percent. There's a concept called unit economics where instead of like overwhelming the engineers with like, you're over by $50,000, you can challenge them a little bit and say, you have an application that is costing $1 per student that takes tests. How do we get that under $1 next year? What are some things we could do? And you can gamify that, and they're like, well, if I shut this off and I don't run these jobs and I batch this, like we can get it down to 93 cents per student. That really adds up. And so that's a big concept that people are trying to understand a little bit more in the FinOps space. And then we still are seeing adoption. And so as much as Kyle and I have been around FinOps for 4 or 5 years, I mean, every single week we have someone come to us and say, I think I need a FinOps practice at my organization. How do I pitch it to an executive? How do I sell this? I'm asking for headcount to save money. How does that make sense? And so I think the communication on adoption is still pretty heavy.
I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the definition of FinOps that FinOps at its core is a data and a culture problem. And one of the ways that we're trying to help the community solve that data problem is through focus. I think we've talked about focus at least 300 times today, if I'm counting correctly. So won't labor on this, but the idea is instead of having cloud provider 1, cloud provider 2, maybe cloud provider 3, 4, 5, you have SaaS data, you have all this internal cost data. Instead of everyone spending so much time trying to normalize that, let's align on an industry's specification, so that way we can start solving some more of these critical problems that Ashley was showing on the previous slide. And then on the culture side, I mentioned this earlier, was about speaking a common language. That's where we're here to help with the FinOps Foundation, is helping everyone talk and use the same language through training. And one of the best ways to actually enable your organization is through getting the right training for the right persona. So we talk about commonly like people who are actually your core FinOps team. This FinOps certified practitioner is going to be great for you. But we also mentioned there's all those different personas that are involved in FinOps, like procurement. Procurement doesn't need to know all the intricacies of FinOps, so we have persona-based training that really helps them get the quick information that they need to help understand the challenges with this space.
Okay, fun fact, when I was on my FinOps team, I had bought a SaaS solution, and Kyle worked at that company, so I got to tell him all the features I wanted, and he accepted all of them.
And we delivered every single one of them, too.
Everything you delivered, yeah. And so just real quick, like coming from that background, like what does the ecosystem look like over there?
Boy, has it changed in the last 4 years. I think this summer, sometime over the summer, we passed 100 partner members at the FinOps Foundations. There's a lot of vendors out there. And the state of FinOps data is telling us that the average FinOps practice has 4.1 tools. And this is even really counting homegrown tooling, which I'd throw in there as well. So why is there a need to have 4 different options? Native tooling. At the end of the day, if your engineers are already in the console, getting them some relevant information out of their tools, if they're already there, at least you're meeting them where their needs are. At some point, we like to call it Cloud Star because there's Cloud Health, Cloud Checker, Cloud Monitor, Cloud Ability, Cloud Bolt, Cloud Fix. Couldn't get to 10, thought I could. There's more, trust me. There's some need at a certain point to have kind of a full-fledged solution that can help you get full visibility across every little facet of your organization. Another place where maybe people who aren't in the native tools can access the information they need. Well, like the cloud providers are great, but they don't necessarily always give you the highest quality data or the most enriched data. Sometimes there's a need to have some form of observability tool like a Datadog, a New Relic. It's not a plug for them, vendor neutral. There's a reason to help you enrich the data in some way, shape, or form. And then depending on how big your FinOps team is, what your priorities are, there's a whole sector, if you will, of these specialized FinOps tools. So if you decide that you want to leverage one of these automated reserved instance, committed use discount tooling out there, you can outsource that with the tooling. If you're struggling with getting visibility into your container costs, there's all kinds of specialized tools here. So pretty quickly you can see how the average FinOps team has at least 4.1 tools, and I'd be willing to bet the real number's a little bit higher than that. So people know about. So how are we helping you navigate this whole space? Well, in June, we released our landscape project. So of those 100 vendors that we were talking about, we have a feature. It's free, good old open source community, landscape.finops.org. The FinOps Landscape project is really meant to help you kind of narrow down your tool selection. So if you go to the Landscape project and actually apply the filters, let's say you're looking for a FedRAMP certified solution, the Landscape will actually automatically filter down all the vendors that are FedRAMP certified, or whatever your needs are. Landscape can kind of help narrow down that list of those 100+ vendors that are out there.
And then, we hit a big milestone as a foundation this last couple of weeks. I joined as one of the early members, maybe member 35 or something like that. And the reason I joined is I felt like if there was many of us together, we could really change the way that some of the cloud providers were providing visibility data, or we could get more features that we wanted. So the more, the mightier, right? Well, this last couple weeks was a big moment for us because we signed you to us as a partner. So now we have all major cloud providers that are part of our community, contributing, speaking at events, giving recommendations, and hearing us. And so that was a big accomplishment. What else is going on with the cloud service provider area?
We're really seeing the cloud providers lean heavily into the space, and I think it's a factor of economic uncertainty for organizations. Rising interest rates is making your cost of capital significantly higher than it used to be, and the cloud providers are getting a lot more pressure to up-level their FinOps tooling and capabilities, and they're frankly also realistic on where they sit in the broader ecosystem, and it's a combination of these tools. So Google at Google Next released the FinOps Hub. They have a bunch of features built in there around helping you score your FinOps practice, how mature or efficient your organization is. It's something to help get you off the ground. I think all these are free. And I know we have a bunch of really exciting announcements coming out from Azure and AWS in the next month at their conferences. So stay tuned for those announcements. All right, Ashley, winding down. So we talked about tooling, talked about technology, talked about talent. Shit. Oh, what's the fourth one? Tools. Got it. When are you done with FinOps?
Yeah, so the answer is you're never done. I think there was a fear early on that I'm going to optimize all this spend and then I'm work myself into a job. That's yet to happen. We've seen people that are now, year 7 still doing FinOps. Natalie Daly, she works for HSBC. She's one of those people that we would categorize as a runner, very advanced FinOps practice. But if you have Natalie Daly where she thinks she's at, she's kind of grouped where she is in a lot of the capabilities that she's building. So it's interesting to see things like they think they're doing a phenomenal job at storage and power scheduling, but then you go over there and they're like, we haven't even started doing reservations in another cloud provider yet, right? And so you're really never done. And I think even when you get like, this is getting easy, maybe I need a little challenge, then you get things thrown in like this AI, or all of a sudden a lot of organizations, the rise of sustainability is coming in. Well, if you're showing cost data, why don't you show carbon data? And so we haven't found the finish line yet. It just continues. And I think the bigger key is you just kind of get better and quicker at doing some of this FinOps stuff. So I'll kind of leave you with all of this. We've shared a little bit what the foundation does. Let me have a join. It's a free community to join. We have a Slack channel. We've got a lot of virtual events that are happening. Here's just a lot of our other things that are going on. We do a big conference in San Diego in June, and just love to have you be part of it. Have other people who join. We have people from there from procurement and finance to executives that are all part of the community, and it's just been a great adventure for us and just cool people to hang out with.
So if you haven't joined already, that QR code will take you to finops.org/join. It's completely free to join. Fill out that little form real quick. Click for individuals, not for enterprises. I think that's all we got. All right.
So we'll take some questions from you all.
Again, there are drink tickets riding on this.
How much of this work kind of ports over to on-prem or private data centers?
That's a good question. So we've been very specific about it being cloud focused, but what we are seeing, there's a big retail organization that is, I would say, been really good at FinOps. So now they're being asked, can you do this and you duplicate this for on-prem? Or some of them say, we're never going to leave on-prem, but we need to have our efficiency lower here, and we have an application that is connected to on-prem, and so we did a good job showing cost here. I didn't see it there. So I will say there's pockets of it being done, but the biggest difference with private is you don't have that variable spend, and that's really what FinOps is focused on.
There's a bunch of other frameworks out there too, and we've got a bunch of, as Ashley mentioned, our working group outputs. We have playbooks out there that we've developed with ITAM, SAM, and these other frameworks, and I think they're coming at the problems from different directions. Like it's top down versus bottom up. You can get really granular data with cloud, which is awesome, but also creates the problem and the need for focus. The nice thing about data centers is it's largely CapEx. You largely know what it is, but then actually allocating that out or figuring out who's using what is where the challenge becomes. So if you have a partner team like that, the more teams need to collaborate, the more you can work together to understand, each skill sets. They'll help you get better visibility into that hybrid world.
Oh yeah. Do you have any data on, I find a lot of large companies will just go in-house eventually for their product build versus buy. Do you have any data on what is the number one reason for that? Is it chargebacks, is it allocations? Why is all the 100 tools that you're describing right in the world and all the pre-seed and Series A companies coming out, what is it that they're not able to solve that we just end up going in-house?
I really think it's the organization's culture. The company that I was at, it was not our culture to do that. We wanted to be really good at standardized testing, right? And so we were very adamant that we would buy the best of the best products. A lot of other organizations we want to hire the best of the best engineering talent, and they want to be challenged. And so we're going to let them build these products. There's also, kind of a lot of these people are trying to keep up with the features. And so if you've been waiting for a feature for a while, it might make sense for you to build it. But I do think it's the talent and the culture that you have that's
spend all of our savings to do it. So it's easier, not easier, but it's better spend for us to continue our own development until there's something novel, something completely brand new in the industry. It doesn't make sense to do a conversion back. So if you've grown with it over time, then you'll find more homegrown there.
I think like the life cycle of it is we went back to like that talent slide, the less than 1 million, it's don't buy, right? Take the free stuff as much as you can, then it's probably a buy decision, then it's a buy and build, like you're buying something, you're building on top of it, and then eventually hit a certain scale where, to Anne's point, you don't need all these extra features that you're paying for, so it's like, it's just better economic decision just to build your own.
There's been some really good open source projects in the space too. So if you're familiar with CNCF, they've got like Hypercross, Flucos, Custodian. There's been some really good things that people, they look at that specialty tool, they're plugging and playing an open source specialty tool.
Yeah, I've been to tooling section. I didn't see anything around like data analytics or data warehousing. How's all the information that we're doing our modeling on? Is that something you think would live there, or is there a reason you kept it off?
It's really, I mean, it really is sitting as like a foundation underneath all these, right? So it's the platform teams are taking the same data that you have access to and enriching it. It's more like a foundational thing. I think that would just broadly fall under like the platform.
Yeah, really part of the platform.
Because yeah, this is where your homegrown data. So you're either paying for a cloud star, you're building a homegrown solution, or you're just querying off, the database itself, or bucket, whatever it is.
So in a multi-cloud environment, if each of them providing native tools, do you have any recommendations on how to kind of synergize them? Meaning there's focus for cloud billing, but the optimizations, each one is going to recommend their own, and so on.
It's
Yeah, I'll go to that. Like I said, like that's one of the reasons why we're really excited about Focus, so we can normalize a lot of that data. So the cloud, a lot of the vendors are also going to help normalize that data too. And so then if you're creating your own homegrown, you would do it as well. I would say even with having multi-cloud, it's not just about the data too at that point. It's like if you have to have a anomaly detection set up, you got to have it for all three cloud providers, right? And so it's like, we had sometimes decisions that were like that cloud provider is not FinOps ready for us yet because we don't have all those things done. And so we would make some decisions to put an application in this system because we had that foundation ready. So that's something people have done assessments to say, we actually need to hire like a FinOps person that has more specialty in this cloud provider. Otherwise, we're not ready to start reporting on that cloud provider.
I've also rarely found an application or like an end user is truly multi-cloud. Usually multi-cloud strategy is at a enterprise level. So if you're just one application, you're just going into like wherever you're deployed.
Yeah, that's the state today.
As part of the framework or the tools that you suggest on that, what part or what suggestion do you have to control the automatic deployment tools like Atlas, Terraform, CloudFormation, that usually take months of resources? And you notice that after the developer implements, after you move to production, after that. What is, for you, what is the best practice to control that?
Yeah.
So
And automatization at corporate level?
So I think the question is like, when is it time for automation?
No, I mean, what is the suggested control on budget
Oh, on budget. So
to
I've been
control that automation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we previously did is everything that moved into cloud got its own like account. So we did divided by account structure. They were required to provide an estimate. That estimate had to get approved by budget, and then that was their initial budget that got set. And so we would watch that, and if they went over that, then we would have discussions with them on it. Otherwise, we let them go all the way to be operational and gave them like 4 weeks to run their product, and then as a FinOps team, we would typically jump back in and say, okay, you stayed under budget and you got this thing launched, now let's talk optimization, let's talk doing reservations and things like that. So for me, it was important to be incorporated with our project management team that knew like that product's life cycle so we could jump in there. Does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
very complete.
Okay, yeah.
that I'm very adapt the problem that currently I have in the organization.
Yeah. So, and we've also seen other organizations that are like, open an account and like, they don't catch it till later, or, some people have sandbox accounts and they're like, you only get $500, and you go above that, we're like nuking everything in there. So they're depending on the organization and
sometimes just getting visibility to it. When I stood up our internal FinOps team at my last startup, I think we had 200 employees, so pretty big startup. I think we had like over 500 like cloud accounts, and it took us 2 months just to actually reconcile the invoice internally. So I went to finance and just tried to get my hands on as many transactions that matched to a cloud provider, and then we worked back from there to kind of clean up all the spend because we had zero visibility into it.
Yeah, definitely. With those tools that you have to automate the creation of the resources.
Mm-hmm.
With one approval, you are able to charge $1,000 in 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and repeat that every day. And it's uncontrollable at some point.
Yeah. Right here.
You mentioned sustainability, which I think, I've heard it more than once
Yeah.
today, and I think it's a big thing, actually. I was thinking with my boss, and I said, like, we're trying to do some cost optimization, and, habits of people is, the money's not lying, right, enough to use it, but if you add that in, that sustainability factor, right, being a good citizen, do you see that kind of taking off, and you see these tools integrating, or is it going to kind of be a separate team, and then kind of have, FinOps and sustainability, and they're kind of doing two separate efforts, when you think about it, how one can be a lot more to the end user.
Yeah, what's funny about the sustainability thing is it's been hot in EMEA for 2 or 3 years now, and we have state of FinOps data that shows the same thing. That's a much more important target in EMEA. And you're absolutely right. We've seen that if you start identifying cost and sustainability as, and frame it as the other pillars of being well architected, engineers who really like solving hard problems just view it as another variable that they have to optimize around on top of resiliency, security, everything else.
Yeah, I think we also see like there will be a sustainability framework and there will be a FinOps framework, but it's where our data can intersect together. And I think we're already making dashboards about tagging compliance based on spend, and why not add the carbon feature or so forth. So I think it's coming. It's early days, so give us a year and we'll probably have some people that do really good examples of it.
As we've talked internally about this and the intersection of it, at the end of the day, the FinOps team is probably the best position to also be the sustainability champion or to partner if you have a chief sustainability officer. Because of all those different personas you're already working with, you're already plugged in, you already have the data. There's just, for that to be added onto your scope isn't that big of a lift versus that being a net new role.
And it's also to show that, the cost saves translate into sustainability,
Yep.
benefits as well, not just someone who's architecting for it, but the benefits you get from reducing your costs and reducing the carbon footprint, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like the side effects that you don't really see up front, but getting them anyway.
It's a different language for engineering, right? We're always talking costs, we get a little tired of that, so we bring in another element of like the unit economics, right? Let's get the metric down a little bit. I think sustainability is another metric, another challenge.
Where that gets really fun too is not every cost optimization decision is necessarily a sustainability optimization decision. Like making a commitment to a provider that you're gonna run this server nonstop for the next 3 years is not a great carbon emissions, but it's great from a cost savings perspective. Also, everyone who asks a question gets a free drink ticket, so make a friend. I got 4 drink tickets left.
If you go back to the slide of that engineers aren't, engineers would rather whatever.
Empowering engineers to take
Is
action.
it because most practitioners are not engineers and they don't understand that? Because, like, what do you think the reason for that is? Clearly, like, anyone who's an engineer knows the reason is they don't have the data in front of them, right? But it's always, like, top of list for this kind of question. So is it because it's a lot of practitioners or the FinOps owners of their domain are non-engineers, so they think, hey, they should do something about it? It's such an easy thing to point at, but I've always had an issue with that, being the top of the list for most practitioners there.
I think it's because it's practitioner's perspective right here when they're answering the question. And so like, my biggest challenge is getting them to do work, and right? And it's like,
Right.
no, probably not your biggest challenge. It probably is getting the data in front of them first. It's probably getting it prioritized. It's probably like, working on goals with the, engineering leaders so you're moving towards the same thread. But it's easy to kind of bucket into this area. But then like when you sit and talk with engineers, like they're like, yes, I want to save money, I want to do this, but I've got like these feature requests that I have to do first. Like you talk to my boss, and he says I should do that work, then I'll do that work. And so I think this is like breaking the barriers. The other thing I've seen a lot is we start seeing more like FinOps engineers, so people within a FinOps team hire engineers, and I love that because now you're getting that engineer mindset into the FinOps organization, and they're starting to build like tools and things that will actually help the engineer versus like just providing the insight.
Yeah, I think the similar take to yours is as a centralized FinOps person, you're sitting there, you see this huge list of, well, if we just go right size these 200 servers, we could go save, you know, $200,000. And it's, if you're putting the product hat back on, if I'm sitting there prioritizing the sprint for the week, it's like I'd much rather get more features out, anything that's gonna be revenue generating, and any security patches. And like a security patch is probably gonna get me fired. Trying to save $1,000, like I can probably kick that can down the road. So it's easy for that to get deprioritized. So that's where we commonly talk about, let's get the information in front of them so we don't make it so easy. So point them to the native tools if you need to. Integrate with people's Jira backlog and start adding stories there and just try to reduce the friction. And as we talk about that culture change, just get it to a point where you're actually architecting for cost efficiency up front. Just don't go deploy the biggest server you can because you can. Like, let's actually have a conversation about serverless architectures or auto-scaling groups or what's gonna make sense for your workload.
It almost begs a question, like, we look at security, we don't allow unencrypted S3 buckets ever. Will we allow a massive R5 instance to be running? I think in like 5 years' time, it feels like that one will go away because there won't be a choice to be inefficient in cloud cost. Whereas now we look at, you know, security and we think like, oh, it'd be insane to like go to even dev with an unsecure instance running or whatever. Will we allow, you know, financials to just be something to look at after, hey, you should really put in your priority in your backlog versus you don't have an option, you have to do it.
Yeah, that's why I think EC2 launched in 2006, but like FinOps didn't become a thing until probably 2016-ish, and it just took time for coiling the spring. Like you had to build enough spend, it had to become meaningful enough of a line item to the CFO or the CTO for them to care, and then that's where a lot of this has come from. And then combine that with rising interest rate, economic uncertainty, like that's what's driving a lot of this.
Yeah, there's definitely been some organizations that have said, like, this is the family size you're allowed to use, and like, start to put those guardrails and locks and that stuff down too. So, yeah, it has to work with your culture.
Back here.
Do you have any data on all those savings or cost optimization that, you know, Fortune 50 companies, where do they actually go? Is it the bottom line? Do they increase the bonus support for their employees? Is it because, you know,
It's definitely bonuses. Yeah, that is. Yeah.
We can tell maybe from FinOps, Adobe presented there at a great conference, and you guys familiar with Firefly that they came out with? It's really cool, like, you know, pick an image, change the colors, get dressed, like, very cool tool, right? And they said that when they were looking to like kind of fund that tool, they were looking across organizations, like where can we full fund? And their FinOps team was able to say, like, actually we've seen cost reductions here, like we applied some more pressures here, like they were able to work with their FinOps teams to like justify the spend on that stuff. And so that's why we like try to care about saying, FinOps is about saving money, but it's not. It's like making your best business decision. And you know, that's the FinOps team can have insights into seeds and that stuff and where those could be made. So I think that's my favorite example of like the organization went to the FinOps team to like double check that there was money somewhere, and they were able to show the evidence of the savings against budget. Because you don't finance if there's a savings and just take it, right? So they were able to really show that evidence.
Anyone else? Got 3 drink tickets left.
All right, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.